Hello everybody, it's Professor Parrish. I hope that you all have had a good midterm now that midterms are over and paper 2 is submitted. I know a lot of students have said in the past that paper 2 was the hardest paper for them to create in the semester, and I would argue that paper 2 and paper 4, our last paper, are our hardest papers, only because with paper 4 it's a longer paper and we will get to it in about a month. But also paper 2 is such a different paper with different options, and it's not a traditional essay format like we're used to. So I'm working through grading paper 2 right now. You should get those papers back this week being graded at the weekend at the latest, and then November 4th, if you choose to revise, is when those revisions will be due through email, like what we did with paper 1. So if you didn't get a good grade or a grade that you wanted on paper 2, you still have a chance to revise it. All right, so I know that we are jumping straight into paper 3 about drama, and we're going to talk about drama today, but paper 3 is, in my opinion, our most straightforward and easiest paper to create, only because it's very traditional. It's what you would expect out of a normal essay. So I'm on our site here, and as always, I am going to be putting our video links up here in the announcements. If you've not done this course evaluation, please do so. Be honest with your answers. There is a section where you can add comments. I would encourage you to, because I look at these course evaluations and get feedback from them, so I appreciate it and think it's helpful. Also on our introductions, our handout sections, please make sure that you're scrolling down and seeing all of these handouts. I just posted, I'll scroll down to week 10, the drama presentation right here, and I'm going to repost it in week 11 and 12 because it'll go along with that too. But paper 3 guidelines, it looks like some of you have already downloaded it. Yay! I do want to go over that real quick. And kind of zoom in here. Alright, so paper 3, as I said, is a more traditional paper. It is focusing on the genre of drama, which we're going to be looking at these next couple of weeks, and it will involve you choosing one play from Discovering Literature, our glorious giant textbook. It can be from any of the chapters from page 1130 to 1934. So you have 900 pages that you can choose from. Should be fine, right? That is to say, I have had some students in the past find, especially if they're theater majors or they really are invested in theater and speech, they have found plays that they really liked that were not in our book, and if you choose a play that's not in our book, that's fine. You just need to, in your thesis statement, let me know. Let me know about that. So after you select your play, you should obviously read it, and you can look at summaries, video analyses, film adaptations, things like that. Depending on the play you pick, you may have a variety of options. For example, Romeo and Juliet has a ton of adaptations, whereas Death of a Salesman has a couple. So once you've figured out what play you're going to analyze for paper 3, the analysis should answer these 3 questions below. Now obviously, depending on the play you pick, you can expand on these answers, because the paper does need to be, as I've stated here, we're back to 3 full pages. So what I want you to do is to analyze the play in terms of character, setting, and theme. Explain these terms and any others that stand out in the play. So you can talk about more terminology than just character, setting, and theme if you want, but I do want you to talk about the characters in the play, talk about where the play is set, and then talk about what is the overall point or purpose of the play. So your paper needs to address that. Second, what type of play is it? And we're going to talk about these kind of subgenres of drama here in the next couple of weeks. Is it modern American? Is it classic Greek theater? Is it Shakespearean? Is it a revenge tragedy? Is it a comedy? I want to know what is the genre and look to our textbook to see how that description of that genre matches the poem. And I want you to explain that. And then finally, in your opinion, what drew you to this play? What does the reader need to take away from it? What is the overall message? Why did you choose this play out of all of the other ones you could have picked? So these 3 questions I'm looking for in your paper. They do not have to be in that order. They can be in whatever order you would like, but they do need to be addressed and answered within the paper. As far as guidelines go, the paper, like paper 1, should be 3 full pages with margins set like they normally are. 12-point legible font. Please do not use large fonts. I have had some students paper 1 use larger than normal fonts and that were quite large for being 12-point font, and I shrunk them back down to size. And so I will do that with your papers. So I've had students try to do that to make a paper seem longer than it actually is. Don't worry, I'll test your papers to make sure they're the right length. And then obviously, this should have an introduction and a conclusion to it. You will cite your textbook in MLA. Even if you choose an outside play, you're going to be talking about terminology. I'm going to start counting more and more points off if you don't include the works cited page and cite the textbook. So please make sure that you are doing that. Have a works cited page with your textbook cited, as well as any other optional sources that you decide to use if you do. And you have to have that separate works cited page and in-text citations. So for those of you that did not do the MLA works cited page on paper 2, if you choose to revise, definitely do. But I would encourage you, you need to be doing this MLA because in the last part of this class, we're going to have an MLA exam. Your final paper depends heavily upon MLA. And so I don't want you going into the last part of the semester and miss out on the annotated bibliography that we're going to do is half of its MLA. So we have a lot of MLA heavy assignments towards the end of the semester. And I don't want you to miss out on all these points because you're not prepared or you've not been practicing with MLA as you should be. So if you've not watched my video on week 5 about MLA, you need to go back and watch it. You need to read over that MLA presentation, save it to your phone, save it to your desktop, use it as a resource because MLA is going to be something we really focus on this last part of the semester, and I don't want you to get behind because you've not looked at those resources. All right, so as far as due dates go, the thesis is due this coming Sunday, October 21st. The outline is due the 28th, and also week 1 we have outline guidelines, week 1 or 2. Please make sure to look over those too, because I've had some students ask, like, how do I create an outline? I'm like, it's on the guidelines. And I do go over it too in, I think, week 2 video. So just check those resources out. Email me if you have questions. I'm happy to help you, but since I do take time to put these resources together for you, I want to make sure that you've looked at those resources first before you ask me any questions. All right? And then our final paper is going to be due Sunday, November 11th. All right, so we have a little less time on this third paper because I want to give you more time to work on the last paper that we do, because the last paper is longer and has more parts and just needs more work in general. So we have less time with drama as a unit for this class, but the paper is still worth the same 100 points. And it's broken down in terms of introduction and conclusion, grammar and spelling, the analysis and content, whether you answer those 3 questions, and then formatting and page length. And you'll notice that more points are being given because of the works cited and citations. All right. Not accepting any late papers. Keep that in mind. And then email me if you have questions. All right. So that is paper 3. Again, a much more traditional format, and one that students seem to find easier than paper 2. More like paper 1. Okay, so with drama, we are going to only talk about slides 1 through 5 today because we're only talking about our preview chapter, chapter 26. So we don't spend as much time on drama. for a couple of reasons. One, because I want to give you plenty of time for our last paper of the class, but also we have two other courses that you can take that are just drama. We have Intro to Drama, which is an English-based class, and then we have Intro to Theater, which is a theater-based class. So if you're really invested and wanting to learn more than what I talk about with drama, I would seriously recommend that you take those classes. Mr. Kimball and Mr. York do a fabulous job teaching them, and I think that they're a great class if you want to get involved and learn more about drama as a genre. So because we have those classes, I don't talk as much about it here because I don't want it to be repetitive if you decide to go take those classes elsewhere. So on page 1131, we have this cool picture of the globe there and the kind of the steps all circling around it. And our book talks about the elements of drama and how drama is different depending, it's different than any other genre that we will encounter with literature. Because with text, we have a certain voice when we read it, we interact with the book a certain way. When you watch a movie, that book is being reenacted in real time with real actors, so your perceptions can change. But theater is even different from film. As you guys will see in our discussion forum and the videos that we watch, there is a distinction between live performed theater and film versus text as well. So we are going to look into that in some of the assignments we do this week and next week. As far as terminology goes, we have a lot with theater and drama, so I'm going to go through some of it today with our preview chapter. These two sets here, soliloquy, that's how you say that, soliloquy, and monologue, and then aside and confidant, these kind of pair up together, and they will be on your exam. Soliloquy is a long monologue. Like an entire scene is just one person talking. So there are scenes throughout Hamlet, for example, where Hamlet is talking to himself, he's planning things out, but it's an entire scene. Like he is the only one there, and then the scene ends. A monologue is a short version of that. So if a character just has a moment of internal dialogue, that is a monologue. If it goes on forever for an entire scene, that's a soliloquy. So the way I remember it is moment, monologue, scene, soliloquy. Soliloquies are longer, monologues are shorter, but they are both forms of internalized dialogue that a character has with themselves. All right? And then aside and confidant go hand in hand. An aside is when characters, if you've ever been in a play, then you know that you only have so much space on a stage. So when you're on stage, the laws of physics are sort of abandoned. So if you're on a stage, you may be 2 feet from someone, but your character on stage will act as if they're a mile away because that's all the room you have. You can't just walk a mile away. So an aside is when characters kind of go off to the side of the stage and talk in private. We can hear what they're saying, and that's the point, but the characters on stage, even if they're 6 inches from them, cannot hear what they're saying or are not supposed to. So a confidant is part of that aside, and they are usually the secret keeper. They are the ones that is confided to about something usually very important to the plot of the play. So that's kind of their role. So in a romance comedy, usually the confidant blabs the big secret, and that's the part where the plot turns. They just have different roles they can play in a play depending on the author's intent. But these two kind of go hand in hand, and so do these. Other terminology, foil is one of my favorite terms. I love foils in stories. All a foil is, it is not the math definition. I actually had a student on their final exam one time put down the math definition of foil instead of the drama definition, and I was just like broke out in hives. So don't do that. But a foil in terms of drama, they are 2 large personalities that play off of one another. Or the best example I can think of is a buddy cop movie. So like Men in Black, You've got Agent Smith, you've got Jay, and Will Smith's character. Will Smith's kind of the young, roguish, FBI, and then Tommy Lee Jones's character is more solemn, stoic, like has lived the Force. So they kind of foil and play off of each other. Harry Potter and Malfoy are foils. I would say that I don't know if Captain America and Iron Man would be foils. I'm not sure about that. He-Man and He-Man and Skeletor from the 80s would be foils. But any two large personalities that play off of one another and kind of complement each other at the same time as they contrast, that's a foil. Buzz Lightyear and Woody, classic foil from Toy Story. Something that's complex in a play would mean that it's multidimensional. So we talked about in prose how we have rounded characters, characters that have personality, that have their own thoughts and motivations, and that we almost feel are like real people. In a play, that's called complex characters, where we know their motivations, their philosophies, their inner thoughts. We can kind of get a fully realized version of themselves through the play. And then there's the term of recognition, where a character gains self-realization about themselves, so they learn something about their character and they're able to express it throughout the play, would be an example. And recognition happens for characters in different ways depending on the play as well. So it kind of varies from play to play how that's accomplished. And then the term idiom is a common phrase of a culture or language. So my friend from college, her and her friend actually taught a group of South Korean students at the university I transferred to. They would teach them English, these South Korean students, and they were tasked with teaching them idioms. And they said it was very difficult because a lot of times our language or the phrases we were trying to teach them didn't really make sense in their language. So for example, we say the phrase, "Oh, I'm just kidding," which means you're joking. Well, the students there had a hard time grasping the concept of just kidding because they're like, well, what does that mean? What does kidding mean? What does it mean when you kid someone? And so the fact that it was just this one word meaning the same as something else, it made it harder for them to understand. They're like, well, why don't you just say you're joking? Like, well, because it's a different word, it's an adjective. So idioms are seen a lot in drama, and they can be pretty easy to pick out because they are common, but they usually have a different context than just their literal meaning. So on page 1138, I want us to, if you have your book with you, go ahead and turn to Don DeLillo. Don DeLillo is an author who actually writes a lot of fiction, and one of my professors in college absolutely loved Don DeLillo, so we read quite a bit from him. But he also wrote plays. He was a playwright. And I want you all to look at the very short, it's just a page long, play, The Mystery at the Middle of Ordinary Life, on page 1138. Excuse me. So I really like this play because it combines a lot of different elements together at the same time. For one, it's called a one-act. A one-act play is usually a play that only has one scene or one act, and they can be longer, but they're usually fairly short. This play, I also want you to look at how the dialogue and everything is set up. We have our characters, woman and man, at the top, very generic. We have our direction. So you'll see a man and a woman in a room. You'll see that's where they're supposed to be. We don't get a lot of detail about the room, which I believe DeLillo does intentionally. He doesn't really want us to have a concrete understanding of setting. So, in other words, the reader could imagine this conversation between the man and the woman happening at any time, which I think is interesting. But most of this scene is just dialogue. It's just the woman and man going back and forth. And, sorry, I'm yawning. And then towards the end, their dialogue goes from being extremely flowery and verbose to being very concise and clipped. And then kind of going from this sense of formal language to a breakdown and very informal, almost like what you would actually say to someone, broken down there at the end. So definitely look at this play. I asked this question on here, how is it similar to Hemingway's Hills Like White Elephants? And you could answer a number of different ways. For me, I believe it's similar to Hemingway's work because it is intentionally kept vague. There are details intentionally left out so that we, the reader, can come to our own conclusions. I do believe it's dissimilar in terms of the ending, because the ending suggests that even though they've had this disagreement and they're clearly not the happiest with one another, it does suggest that they are going to stay together and keep each other company, whereas Hills Like White Elephants, there's not really a given or definitive ending to that film. And then at the bottom there, internal versus external conflict. That is, and we've talked about this with prose, that is literally the events happening outside of the body going head to toe with, or head to head, with the inner conflicts of inside the body. So, and then, like I said, we have a ton of terminology for this section here. Deus Ex Machina is on page 1140. I love this term. It literally is Latin for God machine. In ancient Greek plays, it was a plot device that would get characters out of danger at the last minute. So in a classic Greek play, the characters would be hanging off the edge of a cliff. And then at the last minute, a Greek god in a chariot would come down and swoop down and pick them up and take them to land. That is a Deus Ex Machina. And there's a lot of different examples, because I will ask you on our exam to give me an example of a Deus Ex Machina. You can say a lot of different things. In Jurassic Park, at the end, when the original Jurassic Park, where they're about to be eaten by the velociraptors. And then, lo and behold, who comes in but the giant T-Rex, saves the day, and the T-Rex didn't have to be there, it just showed up at the last minute. It was literally a Deus Ex Machina. In Toy Story 3, Woody and his friends are about to become, a vat of molten plastic. And who comes in and saves them at the last minute? The aliens. Characters we saw briefly at the beginning of the film and had no relevance leading up to the moment that they rescued Woody and Buzz or the moments afterwards. Literally a Deus Ex Machina. And you can probably find a lot of these in your favorite shows or books. It's a very common literary device for drama. A subplot is pretty self-explanatory. It's just extra small plots throughout the play that may connect to the rest of it or may not. You may have a 10-minute opening scene with a character that never shows back up again. It's part of it. So an ode, we talked about elegies with poetry. An ode is the drama version of that. If you give an ode to something, it's a tribute. And oftentimes a chorus, which is a group of people in the play, will sing throughout the play the ode or tribute. In classic Greek plays, the chorus was very influential, and they actually told parts of the plot to the play. But now in modern drama, they're mainly just a device to carry music along. And then rhymed couplets is a stylistic thing with drama, and that's when you have two lines in a play that end in a rhyme. And I would say rhymed couplets are very rare. You don't see them a lot, but Shakespeare did like using them, and there are some poets and some screenwriters, rather, still in poetry mode, some screenwriters that use rhymed couplets quite a bit. So yeah, that's all the terminology for drama right now. Lots of little terms I would go over in your book. Look at those terms, look how they're used, because you will be tested over it in drama. I apologize for having this video out late. I did not feel very good last night, and as you can tell, I'm still a little bit tired. I was yawning earlier, so I apologize for that. But I am going to try to get next week's video out a little bit earlier too, so that you guys aren't waiting around to the last minute to watch this. But lots of terminology. We are going to watch some videos about drama. look at some different plays, and so if you have questions, let me know. But otherwise, I am excited to read paper 2 from you all, and I'm excited to see what you decide to do for paper 3. Have a great evening and a great week, everyone, and I'll talk to you soon.